Hello and welcome to Video Game Hangover. I'm Randy Dickinson and I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Hello, welcome. Oh, I am DJ Ross. I'm in Mountain View, California.
Welcome. Each week here on Video Game Hangover, we talk about the games that have been keeping us up at night. This week we're playing Cult of the Lamb, and man, I promise we're going to talk about Harvestella.
Yeah, for real this time. It's what the really listeners want.
Is it? Is it though?
We got so many emails that were like, hey, you said you were going to talk about Harvestella last week. And did not.
Video Game Hangover bait and switch.
Classic VGH move.
Fooled you.
But seriously, Harvestella.
Yeah.
As we continue the farming sandwich trilogy.
God forbid.
Well, I thought you liked farming games.
Yeah, it's fine.
Getting a lot of mixed signals.
I tell you, I don't like that Harvestella.
You don't like Harvestella? Oh, well.
No.
There's not enough farming in it, probably.
Yeah, I that might be the problem. Sure. Let's go with that.
All right, well, we'll get deeper into it, I assume.
We will, yeah, indeed.
Before we talk about video games, I just want to assure people, I want to assure the listeners that, yes, we are aware of the trombone game. Neither of us played it this week, but eventually we will be playing the trombone game, right?
Oh, is it out? I didn't know it was out.
How are people playing it if it's not out?
Well, how do people do anything that's not out?
Wow, man, asking the deep questions this week.
I'm answering a question with a question.
Oh.
No, I thought I've seen videos of the trombone game you shared in our Discord, and I assumed it was just a teaser of a thing that was coming. It was a trailer or a bit of a hype thing that the developers were doing. I didn't realize it was actual footage of a normal person playing it.
A normal person? No, you can play the trombone game if you want.
Cool.
Anyway, I was going to say that I will be playing it during this year's Extra Life Marathon.
Oh, fantastic. What a good call.
Yeah. Well, it's still a bit of a ways off. I hope it's still popular then. Otherwise, I'll have to find some other ridiculous musical instrument-based game to play on the stream.
That's a little over a month away. It'll be retro by then.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll play the handheld version or whatever.
So 2 questions, DJ. What is the trombone game and what is Extra Life?
Well, the trombone game is Trombone Champ, which came out on Steam recently. Or maybe hasn't come out. We'll go to the judges for that.
Hey, champ.
Yeah. It's a ridiculous music game where you play a trombone. It's like Guitar Hero, but it's a trombone instead. And it's very silly.
It's Trombone Hero, essentially.
More or less, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been on a bunch of the streams this last week. But what is Extra Life? Was that the question? What is Extra Life, or when is Extra Life?
That was part 2 of my question. What is Extra Life? Sure, that would inevitably lead to when is Extra Life. But
right. Who is Extra Life? No, Extra Life is
How is Extra Life?
That is a good question. Extra Life is the annual gaming marathon for in support of children's hospitals, the Children's Miracle Network hospitals. Man, gotta get back into the groove of this thing with these promos. But anyway, we're doing it again this year. This will be our 9th year participating.
Woo. Yeah.
And what that entails is starting on the very early hours of the morning on Saturday, November 5th, we will be playing video games for roughly 24 hours. That's the deal.
Yeah.
And we're going to be on the stream and trying to drum up donations for the Children's Miracle Network hospitals. And it would be great if you could tune in and support us and maybe chip in a couple bucks for a donation. That would be terrific.
Yeah, definitely.
Most of all, it's just a fun sort of weekend to just get real gross, playing a lot of video games, ostensibly for a good cause. But it's always a lot of fun. We get to hang out with the community for a bit. Probably, well, we're trying to figure out sort of like co-op plans and other fun things to put into the schedule. But
yeah, it's the one time of year I do any actual video game streaming, so other people can sort of watch me flail around playing video games. And yeah, we get to raise money for a very worthy cause. So that's super cool.
Yeah. It is a little bit over a month away at this point, so it's got some time, but just wanted to give people a heads up. They can
so get used to these promos.
That too. We want to get a little practice in. But yeah, again, that's Saturday, November 5th, all day. So
save the date. Exactly.
Please look forward to that. Should be good. Look forward to some trombone champ.
Yeah. I'm intrigued by Trombone Champ. I don't understand from the videos how it's played. I've only been able to determine that the game does not come with a plastic trombone that you plug into your Xbox.
I have seen people they're already working on like the VR mod. So you've got your little like the VR controllers and you hold those like a trombone and play it that fantastic way, which looks exhausting.
Good.
But I've also heard it works great on the Steam Deck.
Oh, cool. Well, that's the way I'm going to do it then.
All right.
Yeah. I do require somebody to sort of map the controls over to the old Guitar Hero guitar that I have leaning in the corner of my office right now.
Someone is undoubtedly working on that. As we speak.
It's like I'm playing a guitar, but the sound of a trombone is coming out. Womp womp.
That's the dream, right?
Right.
You wanted to sound like a stupid old guitar. You wanted to sound like a trombone.
Yeah. I'm going to take that shit on the road.
Randy's amazing guitar/trombone one-man band.
A Tromtar.
Tromtar.
A git bone.
Yeah, that's what they're called. I don't know why I would say something else.
Yeah. But yeah, so it sounds like fun. And I dig that game is just like crazy and I don't know, sort of predictable, like games that don't require songs that don't require licensing fees being paid. So it's all like public domain music.
Yeah. It does seem sort of like, public domain greatest hits.
Yeah.
But whatever, it really works for the format.
Played on the trombone, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's coming up. Well, it'll be fun.
Yeah. Should be good.
What else? Anything else? Any show business? Any old news? Any new news?
No, I think that's it.
Cool. Want to talk about video games?
Well, you want to talk about them? You play any good video games lately? Should we just get right into it?
Yeah.
What we could do instead is talk about Cult of the Lamb for 50 minutes. And then go, oh no, it happened again.
Shit. How does this keep happening?
I don't know. Maybe we should talk about Harvestella.
And then eventually Harvestella will come out and it'll be irrelevant.
Right. Well.
Wait, Harvestella's not out? How are you playing it?
Harvestella is definitely not out, but there was a demo that came out.
Right. We played that.
Yes.
Well, I've played some of that.
You played some of it. All right. That's enough.
I like to think that I played enough of that.
It's good when you can reach that point in a game and be aware that is you've reached that point.
I believe I'm done. I get it. I get what you're doing.
Yeah.
So Harvestella is what is Harvestella? It is the new and latest attempt by some giant video game company to make money off of the Animal Crossing phenomenon.
Is that what you think they're going for with this?
It feels like Square Enix said, people like farming games. Let's put a farming game in a Final Fantasy game.
Sure. It does feel like, I mean, when I saw this on the Direct a few months ago, or weeks, or whenever they showed this off.
Years ago.
I did think, like, oh, great, another farming game. But it seemed like the angle with this one was, yeah, like you're saying, it's kind of a farming game with a Final Fantasy aesthetic. And most notably, between farming and crafting or whatever else you're doing in Harvestella, you go out and you just like fight monsters in these little dungeon like things.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's really what got my attention. It was like, oh, okay, so maybe there's like a little action game component to this. That might be fun.
Yeah. And while you're there fighting those monsters, you pick up, petals from flowers that you can then use from crafting, and dig up pieces of ore that you can use for crafting. And it has a day and night cycle, and has a lot of very chatty characters who give you advice unsolicited.
Well, that's why you're talking to them, right? Because you need help with whatever you're doing.
You need help remembering who you are, because
there's no unsolicited advice in a JRPG.
All completely solicited.
Yeah.
You of course start the game with amnesia, as one does.
Yes.
I think that's a law. All Square Enix games, you must start with amnesia. Is that right?
I feel like that, maybe at this point, it's true. I don't think that was always the case. I think it became sort of a meme after like what I consider the Square Enix or the Squaresoft at that point sort of golden era. But then it was like at some point every main character just started having amnesia. And it's like, okay, I guess that's what people like in a main character. I don't know.
Yeah, and Harvestella is no different. It is you sort of start under mysterious circumstances. You don't know who you are. You're in a weird village where everyone has locked their doors because some strange sort of natural phenomena is happening outside. You don't want to be outside when, what did they call it?
Oh, here's the thing. So when they were showing this on the stream, it looked like just, your average everyday farming game where everything is very pleasant and nice and pastel colored. And then they go, well, wait a minute. Between your farming seasons, you have this 5th mysterious season called Quietus.
The Quietus, yes, that's
like,
it.
Okay, tell me more. Yeah. And then
the season of death.
Yes, everything apparently just becomes awful. I don't think they fully explain what this entails during the demo, but basically you don't want to be outside because it's like toxic or something.
There's like magic fairy dust that comes off of it, and yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, so like between seasons, there's bad times.
Yeah, and so you are found by members of the citizens in this little village, and they set you up with a fairly nice house on the edge of town, and you give you a little plot of land so you can earn your keep, and you do sort of Final Fantasy / Animal Crossing things.
Sure. I was going to say, it doesn't feel like you do either of those things to me.
No? Okay. Well, you've played a lot more Final Fantasy than I have, and I've played a lot more Animal Crossing than you have. So, what does it feel like to you? Because I felt like this was just sort of the most bland and sort of flavorless and personality-less, combination of, 14 other video games distilled into this.
Oh, it's really bland. It's definitely
inoffensive. Yeah.
It's very, very bland, which that's probably the biggest disappointment to me is that, like, there's just no sort of, I don't know how to describe it. It feels like whoever was making the game just didn't care about it. They were just like, let's have a farm, let's have a crafting system, let's have some sort of storyline that has named characters in it. But yeah, it just comes off as very flat. I was really interested, like I haven't really played a lot of farming games. So I thought, okay, maybe this will be a good entry point. Maybe I will see what it's all about. Maybe see what the big appeal of games like Stardew Valley is. I mean, I kind of imagine why people like that game. But I felt like, at least in the demo, or since this is, it's like the actual opening of the full game.
Right.
It really, like, there's so much time spent on the, like, introducing you to the characters and the story. And I was like, I just want to get to the farming and the crafting. I want to get into sort of the daily life sort of loop. Then I want to go to the dungeon and fight people, or monsters, I guess. And it seemed like it would be like, here's a few seeds for you to plant in your little plot of farmland. But wait, now that you finished doing those, we get to go talk to, like, the doctor in the village, and so you go over there, and there's another cutscene. And then you fight, like, one monster, and then there's another cutscene. And then you have to go to bed, and in the morning there's another cutscene. And I just felt like I had ideas of what I was going to be doing playing this game. And the storyline, which, again, is just very bland, is kind of keeping me from doing any of that.
Yeah, you spent a lot of time in that first hour. excuse me, and I only lasted about an hour and a half.
Mhm.
Just thumbing through just the most boring and uninspired like exposition. The game is very front loaded, full of a lot of you know, not terribly interesting things. Um, yeah, I was yeah, and again for a demo, you would want to it should play a little bit like a sizzle reel. Here's some fun things. Here's a little flavor of what you're going to get. But I think sort of the decision to just let you play through the first couple hours of the game um, is maybe turning me off a little bit because it feels like I got all of this exposition and not a lot of game.
Yeah, maybe not the best fit for this game. Because it does feel like I assume eventually you get to do a bunch more stuff because they teach you how the farm works, and it's sort of suggested that you'll be able to expand the farm and grow more interesting crops. And then there's a whole crafting system. I think there's like a cooking system that I wasn't able to unlock in the demo. But the demo is fairly short. It's like the first few chapters in the full game before it kicks you back to the title screen. So that's sort of like, that makes sense if it's just the opening hours. But yeah, it doesn't feel like you get an incredibly broad experience of everything it has to offer.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily feel like any of the things that it did, any of the kind of the mechanics that it seemed like it was aping from other games, were sort of competently or inspired by those other games. Like the farming stuff, like wasn't the most intuitive when it came to controls, like how to select your tools and how to pick
Yeah,
the
the
seeds.
farming itself was very awkward.
Yeah, and like you were sort of like walking along the grid plot, which is fairly standard for these kinds of things. But like if you tip the thumbstick a little too much, she would just start running,
Hmm. Hmm.
and you couldn't sort of move from one square to the next without occasionally breaking into a jog and then having to run back to the square that you were trying to plant on. I had similar complaints about the combat. The combat was just like, I need a dodge. I desperately need a dodge. Like all of these monsters are winding up for big attacks, and yeah.
You unlock a dodge later.
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't hang in there long enough.
But back to the farming for a second. I felt like, I don't know what my expectations were for farming since I haven't played a lot of farming games, but I expected more than just, you plant stuff and it grows in a day or two. And then, much like with the Final Fantasy Island Sanctuary, you just put it in a box and they send it off to be sold somewhere. And that's how you make money.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, oh, that's the whole reason I'm farming in this?
Yeah.
I imagine you could, like I said, I didn't unlock the cooking system. So eventually you can probably put all these things in a pot or something and make food, because I was desperately in need of food for most of the demo because there's like a whole hunger system going on at the same time.
Yes. You have a little icon of a tummy in the bottom left hand corner of the screen that you have to keep moderately full.
Yeah, so not a great introduction to sort of the farming genre for me, but
Yeah.
I feel like dedicated farming games out there must have more to offer than what's going on in Harvestella, at least in the demo.
Yeah. I thought even the 24-hour like day night cycle was way too swift.
Oh, yeah, I didn't like that either.
Yeah. Like I would barely get, you had that one little sort of field that you could explore and sort of beat up monsters and pick flowers and stuff like that. And I would, barely get a few steps into it. And it was like, nighttime is coming. Best get back to your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they could have eased up on that a bit. Again, I wonder if that is something that is less of a problem in the full game. I don't know if there's like a hard time limit on how long the game lasts, but I knew the demo anyway ends after a certain number of days if you haven't finished the chapters, the 2 chapters in the demo. And I was just like, okay, I don't think this would be an issue if you can only make it part of the way through a dungeon before having to go back to, your house and go to bed. But since I have a limited number of days I'm working with, I kind of, am struggling to maximize everything that I'm getting done during daylight hours. And it felt like that first Pikmin game to me, where you do have a hard time limit. And I really did not enjoy that about that game. So just setting out every morning and really having to think like, okay, so I need to tend to the farm, but I also just need to do that as absolutely efficiently as possible, because then I need to run some errands in the town and then go to the dungeon. And then, I'm just there till the end of the day. It was just not especially relaxing.
Yeah.
And I actually kind of enjoyed the dungeons. I mean, I had some hangups with the combat as well, but like once I was able to get to the dungeons with enough time to kind of mess around and like fight some enemies, I was like, this is all right. I could maybe see myself playing this a little bit.
Do you get a different weapons or anything like that at any point, or
You do. So if you only played an hour, you probably only went to like the first sort of outdoor area, which it's like kind of in the mountains or like a green field sort of area.
Yes, that sounds familiar.
Okay, so yeah, so you spend a little bit of time there, and then you watch a few more cutscenes, and then you spend the bulk of the rest of the demo in this other area, which is like this sort of autumn forest kind of zone.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And yeah, I think I had the same sort of issues with the early combat, where like you don't really have a dodge, and so it feels like you're either taking hits unnecessarily, or all you have like as a dodge is you can start sprinting, which just feels weird. But each job that you play as, and you can unlock multiple jobs, has their own sort of skill tree. So as you play each job, you earn job points, which unlock different abilities on the skill tree. And I think the very first thing, or like one of the first things you unlock on that melee job, is a dodge. So it's like, oh, thank God. That's like the biggest thing that was missing from the combat up to this point.
Okay, yeah, I certainly did not make it as far as a skill tree, so then didn't see any of that stuff.
Yeah. Eventually you unlock like a caster job, so kind of a ranged spell user.
Oh.
And a bunch of other sort of abilities. Those are the only two jobs I got to in the demo. But I thought it was kind of a weird cadence, because I started off really not thinking too much of the combat or just the action sequences in general. They felt very sort of like almost like an afterthought, like the farming to me. But as soon as I started unlocking new jobs and abilities, I thought, okay, well, maybe there's something here that I wasn't getting a little while ago. But then the demo just ends before you get too deep into that. Like, you don't get a third job, or like I didn't get one anyway.
Sure.
And I was only able to unlock 2 or 3 abilities for each one. It kind of left me feeling like, oh, I wonder if that's the case for just everything happening in this game. Because I went to, like, you met the blacksmith, right?
Yes, that sounds familiar.
Okay, and then she's like, okay, bring me your weapons and I can upgrade them and I'll make new weapons for you. And then there's another NPC, which is basically the same thing except for your farm and like the little crafting station in your house.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you unlock the cooking station. And I think a few upgrades for like the farm and everything. And those upgrades were like thousands of like gold or whatever the currency is in this game. So there's no way, like, unless I just delayed progressing the plot in the demo, that I would be able to unlock any of those and try them out. So I'm kind of wondering, like, am I only getting, the very first taste of all of these different systems in this limited demo? Because if that's the case, and if there is all this sort of depth and variety hidden once you get, 4 or 5 hours in, then maybe the demo is selling the game a little short.
Yeah. That's a fairly ineffective demo. I mean, not to continue belaboring the Animal Crossing comparison, because the game is only sort of very tangentially like Animal Crossing. But if a demo for Animal Crossing was just like your first 2 or 3 days on the island, well, that is not indicative of what you're going to spend the bulk of your time doing.
Yeah.
Or how you're going to consume that game, even. So I think, a strange choice was made on how to sort of demo this game. And I didn't feel like the choice that they made was a good one, because there was very little about this little taste of Harvestella that made me think, oh yeah, I would spend $60 on this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder if there's just, you have to keep playing more to get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like how, like, that's fine pacing for a game.
That's how video games work, yeah.
Yeah. I was telling myself, like, I've learned to really sort of relish the periods in early games where you just don't have resources or like just enough to work with. Because I know 40 hours later, you're just going to be rolling in resources. Like, you're just rich and you have more like copper ore or whatever than you could ever know what to do with. And you just got crops everywhere and there are no challenges left. So I try and appreciate the early moments where you go, oh man, if I could only just get 500 gold to upgrade my sword, that would be terrific.
life is so simple.
Right.
Yeah.
Remember, the good old days. But yeah, so the demo kind of left me in a weird place. I was just like, oh, I want to know more about how this game unfolds. Not necessarily about how the plot unfolds, because that just never really did it for me. It does. I mean, there are some interesting elements that start to show up towards the end, but based on what I experienced in the demo, I don't see myself putting this up on the shelf with a Final Fantasy game in terms of oh yeah, this the storyline was so great. I'm gonna be thinking back on this for years and years because of all these memorable characters and exciting plot twists and everything.
Yeah. I mean, and if that's where the thing goes, that's cool. I didn't really get a sense of that in the demo. I think after sort of a little bit of time with the game, I'm like, oh, it's kind of a fantasy setting. The mayor of the town, of course, is a short, old guy who's very wise and gives advice, and it sort of checks all the little marks of how a fantasy RPG village is set up and who's there, and a place you can I don't know, meet other villagers and socialize, and a place where you can get your weapons upgraded, and it does fairly predictable things. But then there is a sort of a decision that is made in the narrative that sort of goes in a pretty, I don't know, pretty surprising sci-fi direction. And I was like, oh, yeah, maybe it's not fantasy. Maybe it's a cool, mysterious science fiction thing. I may never find out. But yeah, maybe there's more to, this onion than the outer layer. And if so, that's cool. But, give me a little taste of that maybe in the demo. Or maybe this was the taste. Maybe that's the full taste. That's all you get.
It reminded me so much of Xenogears, which is my favorite RPGs of all time. It starts out very similarly because you're in this little sort of just farming village and going about sort of your daily business, and just everything's great. And then by the end of the demo, there's this huge robot that shows up, and there's a robot battle. But I felt the way
in Harvestella?
No, in Xenogears.
Okay,
sorry, I'm
thinking what?
Well, so I was thinking of not only Xenogears, but they put out a demo of Xenogears before that game came out. That was paced very much better than this was, even though sort of the beats are the same.
Yeah.
But I felt in Harvestella, they just don't build up to things in a way that is satisfying, because you're dumped into this village after just a really weird and mysterious cutscene about the quietus. And then, you're saying, there's the sci-fi element that's introduced that the villagers just barely flinch at, which should be really weird. But I mean, it seems like everybody in the village already kind of expects whatever, this thing that's going on.
Yeah.
And they're oh, of course, there's I forget what they call the sort of sci-fi looking people, the Omen.
The Omen, yeah.
Yeah, and it's it should be really weird, but everybody in the village, apparently this is just a thing that happens regularly.
One of the characters in the game, upon sort of the revelation of this mysterious thing happening, actually says to all of the gathered villagers who have come to check it out, all right, guys, go back to your homes. Nothing to see here.
Right, and it's a spaceship.
They just go home. No, man, I have unanswered questions.
Yeah. So, I don't know. It's sort of the skeleton of an interesting story, but the presentation is just so dull. It made me disappointed, or I was very disappointed over it, because I've played similar games that are really, really good, that do sort of the same stuff, and it's just not doing it as well.
Yeah. I thought it was good looking. I thought it was
it looked great. Yeah.
A very pretty game. I liked that, and I could not remember another game that does this, but when you're building your character kind of at the beginning of the game, it asks you if you want to create a character who is male, female, or non-binary.
Oh, yeah. That was a surprise.
Yeah, and there are sort of body types and voices that sort of you can select to sort of build a character that you want to build. I thought that was kind of cool. It even changes the pronouns if you select non-binary, which I did. Oh. So yeah, cool. That's awesome. I don't think I've seen any other video game do that. But yeah, the rest of it, man, it's just not terribly interesting. Man, the character design was so bland. It was just every generic JRPG character I could like their costuming, their bodies, their face and hair just sort of felt like, man, you could have peeled this out of any other dumb fantasy game. And yeah, the village doctor, of course, looks like a sort of dominatrix and has, thigh highs and a short skirt on. And
is that just the lab coat is the dominatrix look?
Well, no, everything under the lab coat. The lab coat is always open, of course.
Okay.
But underneath, yeah, she's got stiletto heels and thigh highs on.
Oh, all right.
I mean, I like those things, but it's just not doesn't inspire confidence in a doctor. Maybe that's not probably. I don't know.
I thought there was a. I thought, oh, so this is the village doctor. She is going to be able to set me straight on what's going on, but she just seemed very like mentally removed from everything. It's like, oh, there's a meteor crashed in the village. Oh, whatever. Or, we don't know why. Why? Who would possibly know more about the meteor? And I'm like, oh, you're the doctor. You should know. But no, she just wasn't invested, I guess.
Yeah. And neither was I.
Yeah. There was a doctor in the Xenogears village, and he was just like, yeah, that's what everybody goes to if they need to, get something done. So, again, with the Xenogears comparison. But, yeah, I really wanted to find something in the game to latch onto, because it looks great. I would love to, sometimes I just want a dumb kind of dungeon crawler. But, like you said, not a terrific demo. Maybe once the full game comes out, there will be a little more sort of people will figure out what's going on with the farming and the crafting and see how deep the ability trees actually go. Because, I don't know, I think it's an interesting sort of concept for a game, just farming plus action RPG. I mean, undoubtedly that's been done. There are so many other farming games out there that action RPG must have crossed over into at least one of them. But, coming from Square Enix, I thought this might be a good starting point for me.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised, they didn't put this out under the Final Fantasy name. This wasn't Final Fantasy, some ridiculous farming-related subtitle. But they are kind of starting a new thing.
Yeah, there's I heard another video gaming podcast based on no insider info or anything like that. The host there was saying that they thought perhaps this may have started its life as a Final Fantasy game and got rebranded at some point in its development. I don't, again, not based on any sort of insider info, just sort of speculation, but it definitely sort of feels like I'm not an authority by any stretch. It would fit into that framework of a video game.
Yeah, I think a few adjustments and a couple different coats of paint here and there, you could turn it into a Final Fantasy spinoff pretty easily, or vice versa is maybe the case. But my experience with those Final Fantasy spinoffs is they're all also kind of bland and not quite as inspired as the main series. So I don't know. Maybe that's why this game ended up that way, if that's actually how the game started.
Well, then it landed right on target. So
yeah, it just has kind of that same energy as Octopath Traveler and Triangle Strategy, where it feels so generic. There's just something about those Final Fantasy games where they have so much more spirit than the other teams' games.
Yeah.
And that was kind of missing from Harvestella.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, not everything can be, Persona or Animal Crossing or any of the other sort of games that this, appears in some way to sort of take things from. But
yeah.
You would think at least sort of an amalgamation or a combination of elements from all of these different disparate video games would, on some level, be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be worried that by including all these things, you're just you're only able to put a very basic version of each one into it. But I don't know. I expect more from Square Enix. I don't know who the actual studio who developed this was, but just having the Square Enix name associated with it kind of implies some things.
Yeah, the developer is Livewire Inc.
Oh,
what did they make? Ender Lilies?
I don't know what that one is.
I don't either. That's the only game that they have listed in their Ender Lilies Quietus of the Nights. It has a subtitle with the word Quietus in it.
So they're really into the Quietus.
That's a thing.
Are they related?
I don't know. This is just me doing some quick Googling here.
Would this have made more sense if I had played, what was it? Ender Lilies?
Ender. It's a sequel to a game no one's heard of. Yeah.
Well,
all right, so yeah. This comes out November 4th if you're interested in checking it out. Presumably
I could play this for Extra Life. There we go.
There you go. It's right before Extra Life. So yeah, plan your November accordingly.
Yeah, I got my eye on it. Although I feel like as much fun as I had with the dungeons eventually, they still weren't amazing. And like if the story is going to be as kind of bland as it was through the whole game, then I'm just not sure. Maybe it's not for me.
Yeah. I mean, DJ, you want to do some dungeon crawling? I would encourage you to maybe dip into a Shin Megami Tensei game.
Oh, sure. I've heard of those.
Yeah. There's no farming that I can remember, but...
well, that's the thing. I want to play a farm game at some
You want
point.
to farm? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like I didn't get enough farming out of the Island Sanctuary, so I thought
do
maybe
you want to
Harvestella?
farm, or do you want to crawl some dungeons? Because...
I want to do both, so I thought this was going to be the one.
Simultaneously.
Yeah.
Sure.
Speaking of games nobody has heard of, and also farming games, I got it into my head that I was going to play that, just take a flyer on Various Day Life, which was another thing mentioned in the Nintendo Direct, which I thought it was a joke, because I heard about it afterward, and it just, like, the logo looks like every game coming out of Team Asano or something, like Octopath Traveler, Triangle Strategy, what's the other one that just came out? They all have that same logo.
Oh, Bravely Default is the only other thing I could think of that has sort of the similar logo.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yep.
So I thought this was a joke, but no, it's a real game. And the way I heard it described is you just you play as this character, or you play as a party of characters who take on different jobs as part of their day-to-day lives, and I guess there's some battling involved. And it's sort of taking that to suggest that, oh, maybe you do some farming or just, stuff around the town. And as I was trying to find more information on this game, it turned out to just be impossible. Like, nobody even talks about this game, which came out a week ago, or like whatever that Nintendo Direct was. And yet still nobody is talking about it. But apparently it is not even a farming game. It sounds more like either an idle game, or almost like, did you play Miitopia?
I believe I played the demo for Miitopia, but never played the whole game.
Yeah, okay, so I only played the demo of that as well.
Yeah.
But you would just have like this party of generic characters, and then at some point you would like send them to an inn and select activities for them to do, and then the battles were sort of also like carried out automatically. Like, they're a very simplified version of actual JRPG battles. But I felt like I was tricked. I was like, there's no farming in this. This is just, you're selecting things off a menu. So, now I don't know what to think. I don't know what farming game I'm going to end up playing.
Well, we'll turn it over to our listeners. If you have a game with farming in it that is also maybe a dungeon crawler,
yeah,
and have recommendations for DJ, you should get in touch. DJ@VGHangover.com, or join our Discord.
That's what I want. I want farming. I want dungeon crawling. I want a rhythm game in there at some point. Maybe there's a spaceship. There's got to be hundreds of games out there like that.
Sure. I mean, I've been playing Cult of the Lamb, and that checks some of those boxes, I think.
Is there a spaceship in that one?
There is not a spaceship that I've encountered thus far.
No. All right.
Tentative. So, Cult of the Lamb is... a fun and strange little game that is also sort of feels like maybe an amalgam of a lot of other things. It's you start the game as a little lamb, as an adorable little sheep, and you're about to be sacrificed by some giant creepy old monsters. And it doesn't end well for you. We'll just leave it there. But you have an opportunity to be born again. There is another monster being sort of kept in bondage, and promises you that I'll send you back to Earth, but you have to build a cult in my honor and use that cult to assemble an army, essentially, to destroy the other monsters that have imprisoned me, and then release me. Intense, right?
And you're the spirit of this lamb that has been sacrificed?
You're this lamb sort of re-manifested. You're reborn. It doesn't ever sort of like position you as like a ghost or anything like that, or a spirit.
Well, yeah. So, yeah, okay.
You are born again.
I didn't expect this to involve a literal lamb. I thought it was, the flock or something. So I knew it was a cult game.
Yeah. No, you are actually a lamb. Did I mention you're a cute, tiny little sheep?
Yeah.
That Devolver actually sells little foofy little stuffed animals for on their website. Wow. And in the game, you do all these horrible, gross things. So
the lamb?
As the lamb. Yeah, you play as the lamb. Yep. Yeah. Running your cult, managing your cult. So you have two sort of like somewhat competing but necessary objectives here.
Okay, but I just want to get this straight. Do you look like a lamb as you're playing this?
You do. Yeah, you look like a cute little lamb.
Oh, okay. Just setting the stage for myself.
You have a plot of land that is given to your cult, and you have to use that as your home base, essentially. You have to attract followers. You have to have a place for them to sleep. You have to build a kitchen where you can cook them food, and they are quite hungry quite often. You have to grow food because you can't cook what you don't grow. You can feed them grass, but it makes them sick, and then they throw up.
Don't just feed them grass.
You have to build an outhouse because once they eat, they have to poop. And if they don't have an outhouse, they will just poop everywhere.
Are these people in the cult?
No, they're other cute, tiny little woodland creatures.
Okay.
Yeah. Or there's a ton of different little character models, and that's one of the unlockables in the game is you can unlock different versions of the cultists. They start off as cute and fuzzy little animals that varying sort of, deer and bears and things like that. But eventually you get tons of crazy little like Cthulhu inspired monsters and things like that. And you have to farm and you have to mine, and you have to chop down trees. And there's a day-night cycle. So every day, at the end of the day, all the villagers will go back to bed and sleep through the night. And then the next day, start the whole thing all over again. You quickly build a temple where you can do sermons every day and do basically sort of miraculous acts that sort of reinforce the devotion of your flock. And these are things that you select off a menu and unlock or open with resources. Things like having a funeral for a member of your flock that has grown old and died. You can also do a human sacrifice.
Is that in the same building?
That is the same building, yes, yeah.
All right.
You could take a villager you don't like, or who is lazy, or who is spreading misinformation about you to the flock, and you can sacrifice them. Yeah.
But you're like, all this cult, so everybody's cool with it.
Yeah. Well, people have sort of varying reactions to it. Mostly, it builds devotion, and devotion is one of the resources in the game that you're trying to sort of build, and you sort of trade in devotion for new things that you can build in your home base. It attracts new cultists to your cult and new worshippers. You can build giant monuments that they then pray to and fill full of devotion over the course of the day. You also have sort of various jobs they have to do, like all the aforementioned mining and chopping down of trees and growing of crops and things like that to eat. Yeah, so there's all of that. So you're basically sort of doing like by day, all of this sort of like cult management simulator 101. It's a lot. It can be pretty intense, particularly as you get to the point later in the game where you're not just sort of managing a flock of like 5 or 6 little cultists, but you've got like 13 or 14 or 15 of them who all have sort of varying agendas and varying levels of devotion. And
does it only start with like 4 or 5?
You start with like 2.
Oh, that doesn't seem like you need a minimum number of people to be a cult.
Yeah, I mean, it grows pretty exponentially as you get further and further into the game. I forget how many I have on my little compound now. I'm quite a few hours into this. I've put a lot of time into Cult of the Lamb over the last couple of weeks. And I think I'm over 20. I've got 22 or 24 cultists.
That's a pretty healthy sized cult.
Yeah, it's not bad. There's there's a system to it though where, like, it's a life of servitude. So they're all working very hard and sleeping only a few hours at night. You could wake them up in the middle of the night and make them go back to work if you want to be that kind of cult leader. But it builds resentment among the ranks and stuff like that. So you kind of want to sort of manage a balance between sort of giving them a moderately okay and tolerable life, but also working them to death. Because there's a lot of things to do around your compound and you're only one person.
Well, you can't just have kind of a, slow and steady cult lifestyle.
I
not work them as much, but, achieve reincarnation later.
Yeah. I tried to sort of like, well, I'm going to be the cool cult leader. I'm going to be like the thoughtful cult leader. But the game, the challenges you sometimes to make sort of difficult decisions. You'll get cultists who will say to you, I've given my life to the cult. I believe in the cause. I hang on your every word. It would be a great honor to me if you would sacrifice me.
Okay.
And you can say no, but then you take a hit to your following. You lose devotion that way.
Oh.
And that person who wanted to be sacrificed will then go sow disinformation about you and say that you're not the best cult leader and that, you had this request and it was not satisfied and stuff like that. If you feed them shitty food, they talk shit about you behind your back. If you make them eat grass, if you don't clean up poop, and on and on and on. So again, it's this very fine line of trying to provide us sort of an acceptable life, but also sort of continuing to earn devotion from them, that which you can trade in to sort of upgrade and do other things.
Boy, why wouldn't you just sacrifice them?
Or you could do that, but it's unpleasant. You can sacrifice them, but you lose occultists. So that's person's like the amount of work that they can do, but
just their productivity.
Their productivity disappears. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Gotta strike a balance.
You can build a little home base where you can send some of the cultists out on missions and they will go get new resources and they will explore forgotten lands and they will engage in battle. It all happens sort of behind the scenes, but you lose their productivity while they're away from the camp, but they come back with resources. Sometimes they come back with more cultists because they're out sort of spreading the word about you. So your flock grows. It's a lot. Like, the developers of this game have thought of every weird little nook and cranny that you could possibly imagine sort of would go into micromanaging the day-to-day life of a cult.
Yeah.
It is kind of at its most glaring, a very kind of astute criticism of religion. Like, it never goes down that road of sort of saying, this is just like, insert name of massive Eastern religion here. But it's kind of hard to ignore some of the similarities. I don't think it's trying to be that, but yeah, I mean, if you based a video game on how to build your own religion, some of those sort of, things would seem pretty glaring.
Mm-hmm, sure.
I have not even touched on what you do by night or sort of as you choose to do in this game. There's a whole dungeon crawler element. Here you go, TJ.
Oh, here we go.
Where you have to take down those 4 evil gods who have enshrined your one true god, and who sacrificed you at the beginning of the game. And there is a procedurally generated kind of randomized series of dungeons, and they all have their own followers that you fight. You get cool upgradable weapons with little magic tricks that you can deploy as you build up enough ability to do so. You run from room to room, wiping out bad dudes, scrounging up resources. There's a collectible card game built into it where you get little tarot cards that give you buffs that you can use during your dungeon runs. There is a fishing minigame because, of course, there is.
Sure.
And on and on and on. So while you're doing all of that stuff, while you're doing all of these distractions, while you're out in the world trying to find new followers and trying to build up your resources and collect money and do kinds of other things that will benefit the cult is just sort of doing its thing back at the home base without you. So you have to make sure they have enough food or they'll starve to death while you're away. You have to make sure that someone's in charge and is collecting tithes while you're away, or you won't make any money. So you anoint somebody in the village who everybody hates anyways, to be the collector of donations, and they have to go around once a day and collect a gold coin from everyone.
Yeah, what do they need money for? Like, you're feeding them and cleaning up the place.
Yeah, well, they still don't want to give it to you. They do eventually. If you put out a particularly rousing sermon, they'll fill the cup full of money as well. So there's, a bit of a crass commercialization element to this as well.
Is there a sermon minigame?
It's not like a mini game in the sense that you have to like push button presses at the right time or anything like that. It's basically a light show. You have a couple of like a menu of different types of sermons that you can do. That you could have a grand feast. If everyone in the village is super hungry, there's again a little meter where you're monitoring their hunger levels.
Mm-hmm.
They'll keep working until they drop and die, but you can throw a grand feast at the temple. And it's this giant long buffet table with all of your villagers gathered around it, just gorging themselves. Okay. You can give everyone
basically just the Yakuza business game again. So, like, you want to send them to night school or send them
right.
on a weekend getaway, whatever.
You can give everyone a day off. That's the one that I thought was funny. Is I'm sort of like, oh, what a benevolent leader. You just give them a day free of labor. And they kind of rub it in your face. They kind of lounge around and they stand and they chit chat with their friends and stuff like that. While you're like pulling out your hair because you're trying to do all of the things that the villagers would normally do for you.
Do they all have to take a day off at the same time?
They do. Yeah. You can't rotate days off. Everyone gets the same day.
Why don't you just take a day off? Just be like, oh, we'll work hard when we get back.
Well, that's my point is like everything sort of spirals out of control without you. Like they still get hungry on their day off. They still poop on their day off. You will have like fields of crops that are growing, but crows will come and try to eat your crops. So you have to scare the crows away, or you have to build scarecrows or build traps to capture the crows, and then you can feed the villagers your crows.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I think you mentioned this last week.
I did mention that. Yeah. And that
sounds like a pretty robust sort of cult simulation.
It's nuts. And it's like it has a day-night cycle too. It's a pretty generous day-night cycle. Like it's not as fast as the Harvestella one is, but you're acutely aware of it, particularly as you spend time away from the camp doing the dungeon crawler stuff, and trying to sort of vanquish the 4 evil bosses, basically. All of that stuff is happening behind the scenes. So you'll come back to like a village in shambles. 3 people have died while you were away, master, and their bodies are just lying on the ground. This person starved to death because you didn't leave enough food for us, or the bathrooms overflowed and there's little piles of poop emojis all over the place. Plague can wipe out your village. That's another one. If you don't pick up the poop, you have the possibility of other villagers getting sick from it. Nothing wipes out a cult like a good plague.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's a ton. And yet somehow it's stupid fun. I'm having a really good time with it. It's surprisingly dark. It feels very evil at a lot of times, particularly when you're sort of sacrificing the cutesy character that lives in your village, who you name all of these. They get sort of generic names, or you can name them after, and I made the mistake of naming them after friends and family and pets. Not realizing that they were going to grow old and die someday or request to be sacrificed.
Well, there's like some sort of Twitch integration where I haven't seen it live, but I believe it takes it uses the names of people in the chat, or like the channel followers, and assigns those to the cultists.
That is super smart.
Yeah, that's a fun way of getting people a little more invested if they're just watching.
Oh, that's cool. I appreciate that. It's really good. I'm having a good time with it. It can be quite stressful. I have found that I have needed time away from Cult of the Lamb sometimes. I would be fine to just do the daytime simulation cult management stuff. But there is sort of the added pressure of needing those resources, of beating the bosses, of continuing to upgrade your character in your camp and luring new cultists. All of that comes by doing the dungeon raiding part of it. So there's this push-pull of like, man, I could stay here forever and just make sure that everybody's fed and all the crows are chased away and someone cleans up all the poop. But
there's just enough to do, or you wouldn't make any progress otherwise.
Right. Exactly. Yeah,
Okay,
it does
well,
feel
like, what if
very
that's
much.
fine? What if you just want to run a cult for a while?
You can, and I did for quite a bit actually. I found that I after the first couple of hours with the game, maybe I had lingered too long at the compound, and by the time I sort of rolled into the dungeons, I was just laying waste to everything because I had leveled up so far. Um, there's a statue you can build of a giant lamb in the middle of your village that
Ooh.
collects devotion at the course throughout the course of the day. And it has like 3 or 4 different sort of upgrade levels to it. And before that, I had even gone on to sort of the second boss. I had sort of fully expanded my cult icon in the middle of the camp. So I was just generating tons of devotion and was, again, just
Mhm.
wiping everything out when I was in the dungeons. And I'm like, well, this is cool because I was a little terrified of like the roguelike element of this, because if you die in the dungeon, it's chaos. You have to be resurrected again. You owe your god a new favor, and et cetera, et cetera. But there's not been a lot of circumstances where I've died. I've come close a few times, but I think I've only died really one time, because I'm so far leveled from just spending as much time as I could in the camp without going into the dungeons. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm having a really good time with it. It is, like I said, occasionally quite intense. It is pretty dark. I suspect if you're listening to this, maybe you have a sense of whether or not this is your type of game, or your sense of humor, or your sensibility about what kind of video games you like to play. It feels a little antisocial. I could see if maybe you were a sort of a deeply religious person, there would be stuff in here that's probably pretty offensive. Um, I'm none of those things. I think it's cute and gross and creepy and tons of fun, and I'm having a really good time with it. And it's just the right level of challenge and sort of chaotic management that I kind of like in a video game.
I want to say this, like, conceptually doesn't sound too different than how I imagine Stardew Valley to be. I mean, without the sort of like dungeon crawling aspect. But like, you're just managing resources or growing stuff on the farm. You're probably managing relationships with people in the town. Just doing errands for the most part, right? And chores.
Yeah, I think it's closer to my experience with games like you mentioned Witchwood. It's very similar to kind of the routines that you have in Witchwood, where you're sort of in that game, you're a witch and you're back at your cabin trying to whip up different concoctions and cocktails and
Yeah.
spells. And
That sounds a
then,
bit like Little Witch in the Woods. Is that the one you're thinking of?
no, I was thinking Witchwood, and the other one I was thinking was not Nightcapper. What is that game called?
Oh, Moonlighter.
Moonlighter.
Well,
It's
I was thinking
Nightcapper.
like Little Witch
Yep.
game had the whole day and night routine. You had to go out and gather materials and maybe take some of those to the store or turn them into potions that you the like more practical.
Yeah.
But yeah, just kind of it's a life sim.
Yeah. The combat in Cult of the Lamb is surprisingly robust. I've heard it compared to, and I've not played Hades, but I've heard it's
What?
compared quite a bit to Hades. There's lots of weapons, lots of different enemy types, lots of different sort of abilities and stuff like that. And it is a bit of a dungeon crawler. Each screen is its own little sort of like, locked in room where you have to vanquish all the enemies
Hmm.
before it lets you move on to the next one. You get little stops where you can save, or you can choose a different path. You'll get pathways sometimes that will let you get to either, hey, you get a new villager if you go this way. It feels a little bit like Slay the Spire this way, or you can,
Yeah.
question mark over here. Maybe it's fortune, maybe it's, sudden death. Or if you go this other way, you get a cool tarot card that might unlock some cool new potential thing that you can do. And all of that stuff sort of randomly generated. So it's different every time you go in. So there is a sort of a mechanism here that is built to be, kind of exploited and explored by constantly sort of going through the same dungeon paths over and over and over again with different rewards.
Hmm.
So I don't know if this is something that can sort of be played infinitely. I've not beaten all 4 of the big bad evil gods yet, but again, there's enough sort of happening behind the scenes that you can continue to sort of, push against some of these mechanics to find fun new things to explore and level up, without even having to really sort of dig into taking down those final bosses until much later in the game.
Does it seem like it's ever going to get to the point where everything is just automated? Like you have enough resources in place and the villagers are just, or the cultists, whatever, just managing things on their own?
there's a little bit of that happening already. Like I said, at the point I'm at with my cult and sort of in the progress of taking down now, I think I've taken 3 of the 4 big bosses down. It's a little less chaos in the village when I go away for a couple of days. The day-night cycle goes on, like I said, while you're doing the dungeon crawling. And it's about 3 days to do a run through the dungeon and take out a boss at the end of it, or take out a lieutenant at the end of it. It's a pretty long time, yeah. So, like I said, there were parts of this early on where I would come back and it was, no joke, it was poop everywhere. And people starving in the streets. And I'm like, I was gone for 3 days. What's going on with you guys? But like now, I can step away a little bit and feel somewhat confident that it's not going to completely spiral out of control.
Well, that's good. That's, sign you're progressing as a cult leader.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I've been in retail for a long time, and it's one of the things that I always sort of feel like is you invest in your people, develop your staff. The smarter they are, the more self-sufficient they are, the more they can sort of make decisions on their own, the more it sort of frees you up to do other things, to explore your other passions, to develop new employees, etc.
Just don't let that get out to your employees. Like, it's a cult game really just uses the same skills.
Really honed in on my management style. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. That's amazing.
So this is really good. It's a very cool looking game too. All of it is hand drawn art. There's a lot of really unique kind of characters in it and stuff like that. It's not as like overbearingly explainy or talkative as like Harvestella is. It gives you some mechanics and some cool weapons and a few tools, and the rest of it is fairly intuitive. And yeah, it is, like Harvestella, kind of all things to all people. There are a lot of games kind of built into the Cult of the Lamb kind of a framework. But it seems to do all of them really, really well. In a game like this, I'm almost assuredly going to come down on the side of like, I want to farm and manage my compound, but I like doing the dungeon runs. I feel like a badass during some of the combat things where like you walk into a room and there's an evil lieutenant, like this giant monster that's an eyeball oozing pus, and he's got an army of like masked goons around him, and you just wipe them all out, and it feels pretty awesome. Yeah, and then you collect all their bones and take them back to your camp,
course.
And yeah. And if you have enough bones of the vanquished enemies, you can do cool new like sermons and displays of your power and stuff. It's there's a chain and an unlockable and a meter to fill everywhere in this game, and I keep waiting for it to sort of feel pointless or feel like I've seen it all, I've done it all, but it continues to be sort of satisfying. I find it kind of fun.
There's always one more meter to fill, or just one more rare crafting item that you need.
Right. I agree.
Surprisingly similar, like a lot of overlap here with Harvestella. I was not expecting that. Interesting.
It is the year of the farming game.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I've heard a lot of really good things about it. Maybe this is the game I was looking for.
Maybe. Yeah. So this is...
do you have a sword that like turns into a magic wand and also a watering can?
No.
Oh, well, point to Harvestella.
No. One of the things that I like about Cult of the Lamb, though, is that you don't have to like have a watering can in your in your inventory and then equip it to water the crops.
Yeah, it figures out that you want to use the watering can.
Right. You just stand on the plot where the seed is growing and you push A.
Yeah,
and
that's a good idea.
Watering can manifests. Yeah. So yeah, I didn't have to collect like 16 wood and 3 bones of my enemies to build a watering can. Like it just happened. And I'm like, well, that's a nice quality of life improvement.
Yeah.
So this is Cult of the Lamb. It is out for just about everything at this point. I'm playing it on the Switch, but I know it is on PlayStation, Xbox, PlayStation 5, and 4. It is on Steam. Published by Devolver, the mark of quality. It's really, really good. I'm having a hell of a time with it. I would absolutely recommend it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, what farming game should we play next week? What's left?
I'm playing Ooblets, so I'm going to do Ooblets next week. So that is a game that also has farming in it, but is also a little bit of Pokemon.
Oh, you're just your favorite things.
That's all of my favorite things in one game, yeah.
Okay, well, now I'm wondering if I should actually track down a farming game or just go for counter-programming. But we'll find out.
It is the fall of farming games.
You gotta work a farm in the Vampire Survivors somewhere. I'll play the vampire game. I wonder if you can have a farm in that.
No wonder.
V Rising.
Oh, right, yeah.
Sorry, the other vampire game.
To be more specific. You want to wrap this thing up?
Yeah, why don't we wrap it up?
If you need any more video game hangover in your brain, you should follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/VGHangover. And you can always get show notes and links and tell us what you thought about this episode at VGHangover.com. We would love for you to join us on our Discord. You can hang out and chat about video games and pop culture and movies and video game music and all kinds of other stuff. You can get a link to that at VGHangover.com. And it would help us immensely if you would subscribe, rate, and review us on your podcasting app of choice. And, maybe tell your friends about our little show here.
Yeah, that'd be great. It really helped us out a lot. We'd like to give thanks again to Saria Lemus for our intro and outro music this week. If you'd like to hear more of her work, you can go to pettypanol.bandcamp.com and maybe download a novel or two.
All right, well, we'll be back next week. Until then, this is Randy Dickinson.
This is DJ Ross.
Thanks so much for listening to Video Game Hangover. Goodbye.
Good night.
See ya. See, you were joking, but I did talk for 50 minutes about Cult of the Lamb.